A few weeks ago, we did a video on this power supply right here, which I bought off eBay on a listing where nearly 300 people had bought this exact power supply. And that's just off one listing. And we checked out the power supply. I'll put the link to that video up here, where it turned out to be a very poor power supply. Nothing like you would expect from an actual 650 watt power supply. However, since then, I've conversed with GAMEMAX quite a lot over emails. They claim that this, and after actually talking to them quite a bit, they initially said it wasn't a GAMEMAX power supply, but then I said to them, basically things like the sticker on the fan inside the power supply looked like a GAMEMAX sticker. And they said, well, they tracked their orders and they said that basically the company that bought these power supplies in Australia, they'd essentially ordered 350 watt and 450 watt power supplies, and then were essentially re-putting the stickers, taking the original GAMEMAX stickers off, and then putting on the VP 650 watt power supply stickers that they made up on their own. And as it stands, I'm actually on the side of GAMEMAX after looking into this a lot more, where the other seller that I bought this power supply off, I've tried calling them over numerous days and they just haven't gotten back to me. Furthermore, GAMEMAX have said that they have stepped up legal involvement and they wish to pursue that against this particular company.
Hello, no one is available to take your call. Please call again. Hello, no one is available.
Hello, let me tell you something that is available though, and that is the B550 Taichi Razor Edition from ASRock, featuring a 16-phase VRM, 60 amp chokes, 2Rs copper PCB, and all that RGB bling to go with it. Links in description below to find out more.
But in the meantime, it does make me think, what is going on with this power supply and how did this ever happen? Because I made the video based on the pretense, and this is the thing, I'm always gonna make content where you guys, the viewers, come first. And when I see complete lies in an ad, I'm gonna pull that up. Now there will be some good news here and there will be some obvious recommendations for GAMEMAX going forward, but I do want to apologize as well to GAMEMAX and say I'm sorry that I didn't follow up directly with the company. I just thought when it comes to distributors and suppliers, they generally have a very tight relationship. And for something like this with a power supply like this, to get passed through under a brand's name and actually be a completely different product is a different story altogether. So what we're gonna do, and GAMEMAX, they said to me, like, how can we rectify this situation? I just said, look guys, I'm gonna do a little bit more digging, I'm gonna hear both sides of the story, and then I'm gonna make another follow-up video where, and if you can, please supply the power supplies that I was meant to be testing in that video. So they were kind enough to send us over 2 of their 600 watt power supplies here, the VP series. They said, look, our VP series, especially once you go above the 350 watt and 450 watt power supplies, they do get a lot better for normal gaming PCs. And when we said in that original video, what we looked at was that I said at the end of that video that I thought it was a 350 watt power supply. So they seem to confirm that and say, look, you're pretty much right on the money there. It does look like it was indeed a 350 watt or 450 watt power supply. They just put a fake sticker of the brand name and the actual specifications for the so-called VP650. Now, another thing that does confuse me was that there was actually no VP650 ever made from GAMEMAX. But this is a thing where companies in the past do make particular products for retail and they do make particular products for business to business. This is nothing new. A lot of different companies in the industry will do this. For instance, if you guys know Seasonic or Superflower, they'll actually make a lot of power supplies for different companies, and then they'll have their own retail models that they release to the customer themselves. So one thing I noticed on this original box too is that the label here was actually a sticker over where GAMEMAX would originally put their specifications for their power supplies. And lo and behold, this sticker does come off and it does reveal the original models here printed on the side of the box. So there's one more piece of evidence that I'm gonna show you guys now to say that I think GAMEMAX is in the clear. Though this test, I'm gonna do this before we even get into testing these power supplies. This will be the test that I'm gonna do to personally know 100% if GAMEMAX is in the clear or if this other company is in the clear. And that's why we're just gonna simply peel off this sticker. And actually we're gonna look at the way that the sticker peels off. So this sticker here, it just peeled off ridiculously easy. So what we're gonna try now is peel off the sticker of this power supply right here. So when we peeled off these power supply labels, this one was definitely a different type of peel as to this one here. And I'm talking about the strength and resistance because that means they used essentially a different company or a different way of making these logos right here. This one also feels a little bit flimsier. And the most important thing is this is actually on a different spot of the power supply, whereas opposed to this one was originally on the side of the power supply right here. So as it stands in this point in time, I'm inclined to believe GAMEMAX 100% in that they said, look, it was a 350 or 450 watt power supply. We don't know exactly which one it was because we sent over different cartons of that. And they actually used the same box. The box is pretty much identical to the VP series on this 600 watt. So how GAMEMAX will do it is they'll make the same box for a heap of different power supplies and then just mark it as that particular power supply. So that's really sad that this can happen with such strict consumer laws that we have here in Australia. It's also sad that this can go on and on for months, but we will talk about that later and the recourse available. In the meantime, let's finally put this 600 watt to the test with a GTX 3070 against, say, a power supply, a gold rated 850 watt power supply, and then we'll put it against this original power supply here, just to see the stark contrast and also things like the ripple, which we can actually measure on the new 3000 series cards. And now the first power supply up on the test system is our baseline power supply. This is the DQ850 from Deepcool. We're testing it with the RTX 3070 with combustor, and we're using the RTX 3070's inbuilt sensor just to manage to actually monitor ripple here with a monitoring program. And we can see here the worst case scenario. It starts off and it's got basically it has a thing called V-droop. That's pretty much a common thing if you're putting a load on the CPU or a GPU. But what we're measuring in between that is once the load stabilizes, we can see here the voltages from essentially peak to the lowest point. And the more flat this line is, the better the power supply is in terms of delivering more stable, consistent power. In that there's a thing called, well, it's minimizing ripple or ripple suppression. So what we see here with the Deepcool is that we've got 26 millivolts. It goes from 11.919 volts to 11.945. That's what we measured. So a difference there of 26 millivolt, also from the wall with this system with a 5800X, 32 gigabytes of RAM. We were using 356 watts from the wall during this test. So that's it, essentially our baseline. This is a good power supply. I've tested this before, I know it's good. Let's move on now to the VP600. And we're going to do the, first we'll do the standard version that GAMEMAX sent over, then we'll do the RGB version, then last we'll finish off with the power supply we used in the original video to see how that fares. And here's the VP600. After running these tests, the power supply is actually doing really well. It's getting about 385 watts from the wall, so it's not, it's only using about 20 watts less than the gold rated power supply that we used. Ripple suppression is about 44 millivolts of ripple. So it's not doing as good as a job as the Deepcool did, but I mean, for a budget power supply, it's checking out. I mean, the bronze efficiency that they've put on the box does look like it's legit, and also the ripple isn't too bad. I mean, 44 millivolt isn't the best. It's nothing to go crazy about, but at the same time, it's nothing to go crazy about in a negative way too. So this one's coming in as expected. Let's put the RGB power supply up now on the bench and give that another, I'm giving these, by the way, I'm doing this for about 20 minutes at a time and just letting it run as to saturate everything and see what numbers we see here. Also, another thing is that we will get V-droop as well when we do these tests initially, but what we're looking for is the consistent voltage when it's running. So VP600, the actual legit one, isn't too bad. And the RGB version, the VP600, essentially it looks like it's got the same ampage on the 12 volt line with 40 amps. However, because we're adding in an RGB fan for the bling and we're also using modular cables, especially on the GPU, this is scored in a lot worse than the VP600 without the thrills on board. And we got here 11.814 ranging all the way up to 11.892. So that's actually quite a sizable difference in ripple here of 78 millivolts, if my calculations are correct, which is a lot worse than the 44 millivolt that we had on the standard edition that we just tested before. So if anything, personally, I'm gonna say, like, if you're after a GAMEMAX power supply, just keep it simple, don't go for this fancy stuff. Even though I do like the all-sleeve black cables, 78 millivolt, roughly 80 millivolt is kind of getting into that territory of this power supply is not going to be good, especially if you want to do a little bit of overclocking on your RTX 3070, which it's more than capable of doing. From the wall, we got roughly the same power going up to 387 watts. And of course, that's to do with the RGB LEDs on the fan there, the difference between before and after. But when it comes to the actual lowest point of the ripple, that's not going to increase the power per se. So let's move on now to our last one, and that was the VP350, which was badged by some Australian company and trying to scam people. We're going to get onto that and see how that performs in this test. And lastly, here is the 350 or 450 watt, we will never know. But this power supply went up to 433 watts on the exact same test here, so it is a lot less efficient than the other power supplies we have featured in today's video, but at least it's not smoking up like it did in the original video we did, but that time we were straining the CPU and a heavier graphics card too at the time, so we did see more of a load. But this time around, the millivolt range here has gone up to 84, so again, you're reaching that level of poor, and it's, I mean, similar to the VP600 RGB, but I mean, the VP600 standard did do better. So with these results, we can pretty much give you guys a conclusion now and let you know about GAMEMAX power supplies. And after testing those 3 power supplies out, I can say that the method that I got going on here is a little bit interesting, where we're using the new RTX input sensors to measure ripple. I think, did NVIDIA ever intend for their graphics cards to be power supply testers? That's a funny thing, but definitely it beats paying like a few $1,000s on proper gear to test power supplies. But the results speak for themselves here today. And that is that the budget power supply that we tested out in the original video that we did was something of a real budget power supply. You should only really put them in office PCs at best, as we saw with the ripple there, and as we saw with them being properly a 350 watt power supply. But the thing is, I would have never imagined that a company would import power supplies and then change the label over and try and deceive people. And that's the biggest thing for me, is that I got really angry in the first video, and I do apologize to GAMEMAX for that. And I can't apologize enough. I should have definitely messaged them initially and just said, hey, is this your power supply that's being sold here? But I've never heard of a company ripping off a company that's not really that popular to begin with. But regardless, the company that did this, they're basically scamming people. And I just hate scamming, period. And because I see enough of it going on nowadays, especially since COVID, I've seen so much scamming going on that it's so bad. Imagine a world where you're scamming people, everyone's scamming each other, right? You go down the supermarket and they, instead of selling you fresh meat, they put a fake label on there, fake use by. You go home, you get sick, you then can't perform your job, but even then you go to your job and you're so sick you can't perform, but you're saying you work. The whole world, if we did this scamming route, it would just be so chaotic. So that's why I'm always against scamming. And don't get me wrong, there's a big difference between scamming and getting ripped off. If you're getting ripped off, you know what you're getting. You go to the Apple store, you go buy an iPhone, you're getting ripped off, but at least you know what you're getting. You've got the specifications there for that iPhone, you're handing over the money. But the thing is with this power supply, what makes it so bizarre is it was never a 650 watt. It was a 350 watt, but it was from GAMEMAX, and it was a GAMEMAX power supply in the end. And if there's any feedback for GAMEMAX that comes out of this, and that is basically this power supply was up for sale for so long, which I think if I'd have to justify why I did the video originally, I'd have to say that because that power supply was up for so long and so many people knew about it, I didn't think that GAMEMAX would not see that and then message the seller for them to take it down, which I did start to see things unfold. And that is, as soon as I released the video, GAMEMAX did issue a cease and desist to that company. And then the sad thing is, and the most saddest thing is that the company has then just gone and changed the listing around. They've still got what they're calling a 650 watt power supply for sale. And I mean, who do we contact in Australia to stop this? Because what I bought was an absolute scam. And I know that 280 other people that bought that listing before it changed over, they got scammed as well. And I mean, how many other people got scammed locally on shop fronts and whatnot? The list goes on. But if I was working at GameMax, I would just from now on maybe run around and do a scan on eBay and popular platforms like Amazon, just to make sure that that seller is selling your product and you know that you've shipped them that particular product. Because GameMax did say to me in the email, we only ship them 350 and 450 watt power supplies. So if it's anything that comes out of this video, it's hopefully that GameMax can police their resellers a little bit better. But at the same time, there's one thing that we've always got to be careful of out there, and that is just people trying to scam innocent people out of $1. And that's never gonna change. I think as time goes on, it's only gonna get worse and worse. And so that's why I'm telling you guys, when something looks too good to be true, it usually is. And so with this power supply that I bought originally, it wasn't the real deal. Well, it kind of was, but just with a different label slapped on, and it ended up not being able to power a rig properly to the point where I was smoking in the previous video. But then in this video, it did show that it was even leaps and bounds behind that of the entry-level VP600 series from GameMax themselves. Though if anything, GameMax power supplies, the two that I've tested here that came in, the VP600 without the RGB, without the cables, and without all the extra bling on it, that is doing better than the one with RGB. And so when it comes to power supplies, I would suggest maybe not going with an RGB power supply, just because you're paying for extras that in this case was actually detrimental to performance, which in this case was around 44 millivolt versus 80 millivolt on the VP600 RGB. So I'm not sure what is happening there, but basically the VP600 RGB, I wouldn't recommend it seeing these results. But the VP600 coming in at the right price point, I can definitely say that that will do well on budget rigs. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button for us. And if you have any questions or comments about this whole GameMax situation, then be sure to hit us up with a question in the comment section below. Speaking of questions, we do have here the question of the day, which comes from Rascalpium 2009, and they ask, well, another possible outcome is the AAA titles requiring $1,000 of hardware to run may become a thing of the past. Perhaps more graphically modest games that more people have access to will become the norm. Video gaming is now mainstream entertainment. Why not write games to appeal to the masses as opposed to the enthusiasts? So I'll put the link where this video was talking to up here, but basically it's in relation to latest games like Cyberpunk coming out, where a lot of people can't run that, versus games like Fortnite, Dota 2, and even now I've been playing StarCraft. And I think this trend is definitely mainstream. It's something that's coming into effect, and a lot of game developers are jumping on it. But there is one detriment to that, and that is I feel like some of the depth in some of these games just isn't there. Where we look at Cyberpunk and the story that it had, I really enjoyed that. But if we look at a game like Fortnite, there's not a whole lot out of just jumping into a battleground and then playing it out with 99 other people. But if we look at a game like StarCraft 2, I really enjoyed that, had the story, but it also had the continuance of multiplayer. But one thing I've noticed with SC2 is that they've started to bring skins in, they've made it free to play. So this business model of making something free to play and then just adding in the aesthetics on the characters, that's definitely something that's gonna come into effect. Basically it's saying to the players, if our game's popular and you want to play it a lot and make yourself custom in this game, then you got to pay money for it as opposed to just playing the game and getting into it for nothing. I do like this model, and I think going forward it's going to work a lot better. And that being said, of course, the game developers are going to want to make these games for pretty much all the hardware out there. But that of course will be to the detriment of graphics and improving graphics as time goes on. But for me personally, graphics have always come second to gameplay. I think that's the most important thing that I look for in a game, and that is just enjoying what the developers have made in terms of the game itself. Anyway, hope that answers that question. I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. If you stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, then be sure to hit that sub button, ring that bell on the way out, and I'll see you next time. Peace out for now. Bye.